our company culture or the working culture, we said young leaders achieving the impossible by challenging the norm. So by challenging the norm, you're already off the tangent. When you're off the tangent, you're not normal anymore. So this is where it's our philosophy of working with myself down to all my colleagues. So when we set this principle behind it, right, everything we do is not normal. So that brings us cutting edge innovation because you're already 5 years ahead of the game.
Welcome back, everybody. Rich Brubaker, founder of Collective Responsibility, here today with another episode of the Mission Driven Podcast. Through this podcast, I'm speaking with entrepreneurs, investors, academics, the ecosystem of mission-driven entrepreneurship about the work they're doing to look outside the window, identify a challenge, and bring a solution to scale. In this episode, I'm extremely honored to be joined by Giva Kuppusamy, who is the founder and CEO of GK Aqua. He's a Malaysian-based entrepreneur with over 15 years of transforming the aquaculture practices through innovative solutions. Giva, it's great to have you here. I know you've been traveling a lot, working, coming to scale, finding funding, engaging with other entrepreneurs and like the ecosystem that is the aquaculture space. It's great to have you here talking with us about your insights and experience over this time.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you so much for inviting me to your show. And
as a starting point, an introduction to yourself and the mission that you're on.
Yeah, so my name is Giva. I'm from Malaysia, born and bred in Malaysia. Studied biotechnology, then did graduate studies in aquaculture. 18 years ago, I fell in love with this very nice giant prawn, known as Malaysian giant prawn, because we were the first country to breed them in 1961 in Malaysia. The uniqueness of this freshwater prawn, as its name sounds like freshwater, but they don't they don't breed in freshwater, they breed in brackish water. Fast forward 60 years, we are importing almost 100% what we consume. So that struck me during my graduate studies in University in Malaya when I was studying genetics of the freshwater prawn. And I went further deep into it to really find out what does really cause the problems and what are the challenges and what are the opportunities. And that made my career about 10 years in freshwater prawn farming industry, almost 5 years in a research institute, working on sustainable feed. Then I founded GK in 2017, and fast forward 7 years, we are having this conversation now. Yeah.
You know, you're doing work, you're working in a lab, and you decided to become an entrepreneur. What catalyzed you, inspired you to make the jump into entrepreneurship?
When I used to work for research institutions, I've seen myself different, where colleagues work 9 to 5, but I work around the clock. I look for fundings, I look for projects, I pitch, I win. So then that's all gave me confidence that instead of doing all of that for the rest of the institutions, when I do it for myself, for my own interest and for my own dream to make the freshwater prawn as a global brand. So that's where I started my entrepreneurship journey. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that Malaysia used to, they're the kind of the birthing place of this prawn. If you look at those main challenges in the aquaculture industry, what were they and kind of how did you start tackling that?
So the first we looked at my own research interest in the genetics. So what happens in 1970s, this freshwater prawn used to be the glamour species for prawn, and later it went into tiger prawn. And early 2000, people have shifted to rename, or better known as the chicken of the sea. So in this perspective, we've been seeing that the freshwater prawn had their own challenge. The challenge was really more females and less males. So what happens is when you grow them in a population of a pond, you have 70% female and 30% male. So what's wrong with the 70% female? They can't grow in size. For instance, for 6 months, the male can grow up to 200 grams. The female only can be about 50 grams. So that's an opportunity cost in terms of economic gain for farmers. Then I thought, through my research work, can we just make male prawns alone? Since in 6 months, they can go to 200 grams, whereas the female stuck at 50 grams because the polygamy in nature as well. So one male prawn can mate with 5 females. Therefore, the females will fight among themselves to mate with the males, and eventually have increased mortality rate. So through a groundbreaking technology called RNAi, which also won a Nobel Prize, not by me, but the founders of the RNAi technology. So we did genome sequencing, and then we tried to silence the gene making the prawns become male. So basically, we disrupt the RNA at the RNAi level. So the male prawn, which carry a ZZ chromosome, have mating capability. That means they can grow ovary and they can mate with normal ZZ. So they can naturally mate and produce 100% male. So in this regard, they produce 100% male. The farmers can get 3 times higher yield, 3 times faster growth, and 3 times more money, because the bigger the prawns are, the more money. So this is where the spark of the cradle of the technology, and that's what gave me a breakthrough in this regard, to change the dynamism of freshwater prawn to make a comeback, actually.
So 7 years ago, you decided to make the leap and start into this. What was the startup process like? Did you try and do things in your basement with like little tanks? Did you go out and buy a field? Like, how do you get started on this? Because it sounds like it could be very quickly a capital intensive, high risk environment, because you got to produce and sell at the same time. So what's the startup process like for yourself? And was there a moment where you were just like, it's going to work, I'm going all in?
You're right. So it's all started in smack of my ground floor of my house with 1,000 square foot area. Fast forward 7 years, we own about 500 acre of farm. So that's the magnitude we're talking about. So from 1,000 square foot, we expanded to 10,000 square foot to produce about 200,000 post-larvae. Now we expanded to 400 acres, where we can produce about 500 million post-larvae per annum. So that's the scale we're talking about. So from 2 people, now we're 72 in the company. We have grown our revenue from $10,000 to almost, like, now this year we're looking at about $2.5 million. It's not a huge, but it is huge for a small startup, which still bootstrapping by ourselves.
There's confidence and then there's kind of ignorance and arrogance that kind of kick in. So I'm curious, like, as you're going from 2 to 72 and kind of 100 meters or 1,000 square feet to now 500 acres, like, in that, were there some key milestones or some early lessons that helped you shape the organization?
So I want to create an ecosystem, right? So this ecosystem, I call this as CRIP, or CRIP, stand for Carbon Reduction Insular Protein Economy. So in this CRIP model, it's a sustainable model. So we have 3 things here: the innovation, the technology, and also the socioeconomic element. So if I were to break down the innovation in terms of the RNAi breeding, and then we have also sustainable feed from underutilized crop fed to the insects and feeding to the prawns. That's itself another innovation. Third element is the technology in terms of IoTs, the app for the farmers. The fourth element is socioeconomic elevation, where we work with financial institutions to bring farmers on board. So in these 400 acres, we are not doing farming by ourselves, but we bring farmers on board, providing them 2 ponds of 0.2 hectares. They get a revolving credit from the bank, about $15,000, where of that they can earn sustainably 2,000 USD a month. So today we have recruited at least about 25 farmers for our first 50 acres, owning about 50 ponds. And that 50 acres is what we are scaling to the 400 acres, which is going to be a huge infrastructure development, where we also in Series A fundraise now. So I would say that many milestones been achieved for the company in terms of growth, both of people, but more than that, the socioeconomic elevation is what I personally strive myself, because your biotechnology have an outcome for underprivileged people to earn a rice bowl. I think this is something terribly is satisfying for me.
So you've got to, when you talk about that as a startup, you have multiple things that almost sound they're vertically integrating in a way. Like, you have the labor, the feed, the technology, the final product. It's a complicated business model. I guess I have a couple of questions around that. One is, did you mean for it from day one to be this way? Did you just start off like, we're going to create the technology, then we're going to scale the technology? And has that slowed you down, bring more complications that way? Or is this actually, you're just learning as you iterate that this is the most efficient way to grow, not just your company, but to scale the actual end products?
I think I would say I'll put it a 70-30 proposition. So 70% of the business really solving day to day, right? 30% I really take innovation seriously to create new technology. So as rightly you pointed out later, as we learn, we reiterate. So like the feed was my last 5 years of my career where I was really working on this particular underutilized crop to make it as a sustainable feed for aquaculture. So then as we grow scale GK, I know feed will be what you call a bottleneck because we are importing fish meal. Price of fish meal is going up. Fish meal is not sustainable. So therefore, it's always will be a problem soon. So I want to position the company to own the genetics and also nutrition by bridging this, by bringing IoTs and socioeconomic element into it, that we can create a very cohesive ecosystem to be bulletproof. Of course, for investors, they hate me. They say, "Oh man, I trying to do the prawns or the crop or the final product. Why are you all over the place?" Actually, not. We are not all over the place. We're just putting all instruments in place or firewalls in place. So end of the day, this has become a very complete ecosystem. Yes, you rightly pointed out it's quite a complicated model, but it is unfolding as we speak. We are not dreaming, but it's happening as we speak.
I can see where from a branding perspective, and like you're going to the market, if you have those things, they all work appropriately, you're going to have the best quality product on the market, and then they're not going to even question it. They're just going to pay whatever price per kilo as long as it's competitive. But the scale is going to come through, you're mentioning investors, I'm assuming. So is the investors being confused a risk? And if it is, do you think about that, and how do you approach that?
So no, not really, because when you pay for a kilo of prawns, you will definitely know you're helping the bottom 40 or bottom 20 to earn $2,000. That's the branding, sort of branding we bring, right? You're not paying for prawns where I bring some low, cheap laborers on farm, abuse them and produce the prawns. We are very far away from that. And secondly, everybody talks about food security. Very less people talk about income security. If the farmers don't have income security, you're not going to have food security. So for me, it's to scale that. It's not only 500 acres, actually total allocation of our project about 1,000 acre. So in the 1,000 acre, I can develop 2,000 ponds. How many laborers I could hire? And labor's going to scale your prawns. They're going to not feed your prawns. They're going to have X number of domestic issues within the farm, right? So to really separate out that problem from the equation, we bring micro entrepreneurs in the program, pay them well, and then we as a biotech company, we plug in the inputs, get the outputs. We actually outsource the risk to the farmers to grow them for 4 months, right? A lot of people try to do contract farming, but these people are all over the place. You just supply chain the financing and finance the supply chain. You don't own the land, you don't own them. But in our case, they are encapsulated in my 1,000 acre land. They are dependent on all our inputs, and we take the outputs.
I just see like different businesses having very different models and therefore attracting different investors. Is that true? Is that indicative? Or are you finding one investor type that wants to fund every single piece of that?
I mean, it depends. To say if you're interested in the final product, you can actually take up the prawns and invest on that part of it. If you're a biotech business, you can take my technology and license in Bangladesh. We already have a joint venture now in Bangladesh. We're going to China. So let me give you an international perspective. So our tech is now available in those two countries. Those two countries are top 2 producers in the world, whereas China needs about 40 billion post-larvae at a market value of $1.4 billion. Whereas Bangladesh have a demand for about 1 billion post-larvae. That's easily warrants about 40 million US dollars worth just selling the post-larvae for 30 days hatchery. I'm not even talking about the big prawns. So imagine if I can go to Bangladesh now, we have a joint venture, 5149. And in this setup, we just invest our technology, but we participate at the equity level in the company. Assuming this company is making big revenue and profit in the next 2 to 3 years, this is going to scale. But at the home country, we focus on end-to-end solution. In other countries, we are not. But on the vice versa, this 1,000 acre going to be our flagship model to create an economy of 5,000 metric ton of prawns or equivalent to $100 million. And we can take the model or this ecosystem to be replicated in Laos, Cambodia, Indonesia, Philippines, within Southeast Asia. I think that's the model I'm trying to gear that towards.
I mean, it's interesting. You're already creating different investment vehicles. You've got the 5149s, you've got your home model, and you're actually separating it. Because I don't think that you're gonna be able to do a co-op in many parts of the world outside of your home country, because normally the co-ops are something that they want locally, right? So do you view yourself as building those across Malaysia and into other markets through joint ventures, or are you just is the goal to keep that flagship, build that model, but then really the main drivers coming through the sales or joint ventures of other technologies?
The main drivers, yes, you're right. It comes from the sales, and that model is an ecosystem. Then the governments or any other institutions can look at it if they want. They just can take the whole ecosystem, because when you work with the governments, access to land, access to infrastructure are much more at ease, rather than you go to, let's say I go to Indonesia to look for 1,000 acre, God knows how long it takes. So therefore, we don't want to get into local challenges other countries. When our home we are well versed. We are just 1,000 acre to have the import substitution almost 100% to import substitute the 5,000 tons. So I'm comfortable with that 1,000 acre, and that 1,000 acre can give us about $150 million revenue. So that's more than enough for our company to even go for an IPO on our own without needing to do rounds of Series A, B, C, or D. Yeah.
Actually, speaking of governments, like there is a future where I believe entrepreneurs will be selling back to, supported by, embraced by these governments that historically have not been very open to this kind of thing because of pain points like food security or inflation, or wanting, like in the case of China, to be the leader in the IP. Like, what's your relationship like with the government in that respect? And do you find that if you say the right things, you can get a lot of support? Are they coming to you and saying, hey, we want to work together, we want to drive this thing forward with you? Or is it kind of like, pay your taxes, employ your people, and please don't pollute the water?
We will be hypocrite to say anything negative, because we have raised government grants alone up to $2 million. So that helped us to scale massively from where we started, from proof of concept to pre-commercialization to commercialization. In fact, we got 100% tax incentive for 10 years. And we get the government land awarded to us almost at a price of $50 per acre per year. So we get every support we need from our government. And it's interesting to us because as a biotech company, I think my admiration is, or not, my personal responsibility to make this as a huge success, so that we can see more of this same will be funded by the government, because they will get a confidence with the model, right? So we sort of want to establish ourselves as a role model. So that will take everything towards that, linear or going, quantum leap. But then again, food security on everybody's table. But then the thing is, we are always abused with the word food security, right? So for instance, and let me clear this. No, I'm making some leafy vegetables on my rooftop. That's not food security. Food security is really the essential of the food that people need. So this is where I think the driving force is there. And also Malaysia as a country, we have a lot of biodiversity. And this is what we want to capitalize. So if I can make Malaysian prawn as a global brand, like a Wagyu, I think then we hit on that sweet spot to be really welcome as a leader in the market, and also help other budding entrepreneurs to come along the way.
Okay, so I just want to clarify a second. I mean, you mentioned Wagyu, but also food security in almost the same sentence. Wagyu doesn't improve food security either. That is a nice posh thing to do. So it's not meant for the mass market to keep inflation down. So where do you fit your products? Is your product?
So this is where the freshwater become very interesting. If I grow them for 4 months, it's affordable. As you tried the pasta aglio olio when you visited, that costs like $3. The same product, if I grow them for 6 months to 200 grams, that sells at $20. So you have a different value proposition as the prawn grows. So this is where 70% of our product goes to the mass market, 30% goes to the higher end. So we can actually have a sweet spot, because we also produce post-larvae. We want the farmers to have fast turnaround. So our farmers only grow for 4 months project, start and 120 days. But when we acquire back the prawns, we make commercial decision whether to sell it off to the market, how many percent, often is 70%, and 30% of them we retain in our own ponds to groom, to culture them to 200 grams. So you can see it's a brand of Wagyu, but it's not only one value. It has different value.
How do you look at the P&L at the end of the day for these different types? Because you have food, like the larvae themselves, you have the genetics, you have the mass market prawn, you have the higher level prawn, and I know you have a number of other things. So how do you try and figure out the business model as it comes together and make sure that it's balanced, but that actually you're scaling each of these kind of equally, or you're scaling the ones that will bring the most benefit?
Let's look at our bottom line now, right? 70% of our revenue driven from our post-larvae, because that's 25 days. We can produce millions in just 10,000 square foot. So when you take 1 million post-larvae, you need 10 acres of farmland, right? And that takes 120 days. So we acquire at 60, we sell at 80. So we're sort of trading for almost 30% margin. But of course, gross margin, when you narrow down to profit margin, is about 7 to 10%. But if I take post-larvae, my net margins are 45 to 50%. If I take my brood stocks, it's almost 80% profit margin, because we value added the brood stock, because that's a key enabler for any farms to operate, or any hatcheries to operate. But then why we are doing the offtake, so that it's not going into the mass market or stereotype of, because this prawn is known for premium price. So we don't want to caught in the premium price category, and then we can't sell more post-larvae. So, but then of course we managed to earn at the downstream as well. But with volume, the 7-10% is a lot of income for us. But at 50 acres completion, producing about 10 metric ton, we're not really earning much from that, but we're earning more from the post-larvae. But as we scale, I would say that the post-larvae will give us a fast, quick cash flow, and then finally buying back after 4 months from the farmers also give us good return eventually.
How long did it take you to work out that business model? Like, did that come right away, or is that something you realized over time and it just built in, and now the idea is like, just bring that to scale?
I would say it's a reiteration over time. As we learn, we fail, we learn, we fail, we learn. So as I said, it's a risky idea always. People look at me, oh man, you're a crazy guy, right? But then I said, let's up for it. Now what? Because when we have the control over the technology, right? What I want to be worried of, let's say this farmer might buy my post-larvae, external farmer. When times to come to buy back, he can deceive me to sell to somebody else for extra $1. But again, what do they get? They get $2,000. That's really a good income for B40 in Malaysia. So sometimes businessmen tell me, you can just hire cheap labor. One person can take 10 ponds. But we are not up for that kind of game, because we know, I personally know, I worked in farm, what can go wrong.
I find it funny that you've mentioned several times that people think that you're crazy for doing this. One, are you crazy? And two, how important is that crazy as part of the work you do to get things done? Where does crazy play into you, your personality, and the ability to bring this all to scale?
I think as a scientist, I have to be crazy, right? Because our company culture, or the working culture, we said young leaders achieving the impossible by challenging the norm. So by challenging the norm, you're already off the tangent, right? When you're off the tangent, you're not normal anymore. So this is where it's our philosophy of working with myself down to all my colleagues. So when we set this principle behind it, right, everything we do is not normal. So that brings us a cutting edge innovation, because that's not everybody have, right? Because you're already 5 years ahead of the game. So sometimes investors ask me, so you're going to China, how if they copy the technology? I said, what can we do? But then we have always the first move or the pioneer advantage in the technology space, right? So this is where I think the scale for GK now is very important. That's why I'm like trying to raise the money to quickly grow, because we already have the solid foundation. It's not like guessing, it's not like trying, not experimenting. Everything is been laid. Whether we work with the financial institutions, it's been approved to fund our farmers. The land been approved. The technology is solid, right? Every farmer is comfortable with the growth and whatnot. The number speaks for itself. So this is where we say we are crazy enough to scale. I think that is needed. If we want to calculate risk, we want to be careful, then we are not in business. I'm sure about that.
On the funding, you mentioned you're raising funding, you're going to bring this to scale, everything's on lockdown. How is the funding these days? And what are you learning about funding, or how to pitch the organization, or how to show the results so that you have a higher level of efficiency or a higher percentage chance? I find a lot of entrepreneurs right now are they're going through 60, 80. I talked to one guy, 200 meetings. What's been your experience, in this round? And what have you learned that will help you maybe go from 200 to 100 to 80 to actually selling, in the first 5 meetings?
I think okay, let's say we do this fundraise through Deloitte, right? We engage Deloitte, our investment memo and financials. They have sent to first tier investors about 80. From the 80, 20 have declined, 10 have signed an NDA, another 50 more still no reply, right? It's sometimes funny. Some of them doesn't want to sign any NDA. They want the IM. Okay, we give. Sometimes it gets to the junior level analysts who have no experiential experience in this kind of field. They confused when they look at our teaser. What this guy trying to do is talking about this or that, and he's talking about this. So they completely off the radar. I mean, off the grid, and then they just say no. Like yesterday, I had a very good meeting with an investor from the headquarters in Zurich. They are in the Impact. They have global asset management of $5 billion. Great meeting. My pitch was very absolutely clear to them. They say, well and good, but you're not profitable yet. So we do debt, So in the debt investments, so we need to see bottom line to be profit. And let's keep in touch and let's catch up again in April. But they say, we'll definitely pass you to our equity team. So all these meetings, sometime, most of the time it's turned to be positive, especially when I get to sit with some senior analysts. So this is where we are now. It's not to say too bad, but again, as I said, to get these people are busy. Every day they get like 20, 30 deals are dumped to them. And sometimes they just have to put everything in ChatGPT and get an answer which one to go through, right? So I get that, but what I'm trying to get to is to really go to potential investors, get their 5 minutes. I'm sure if they meet me for 5 minutes, they will fall in love with my story. That's for sure. A story with real substance on the ground. But to get that is what is difficult, right? Because to get 5 minutes of their time, it's not something easy, especially at the partner level, at the managing directors level. But it is what it is, right? Let's see how it goes.
I find it interesting that you're using Deloitte, that you're using a big four just more broadly as a startup. What's the value there? And I mean, obviously you could have gone and done the pitch yourself and found 200 doors to knock on, but instead you chose to work with them. So it's not something I've heard about before. I'm curious, like, what was the value, or why did you come to that, I guess, idea to begin with? And are you happy with that? Do you still have to do all the other work? You still have to find the other 200 people as well? Or do you just kind of outsource it to them, to their deal flow? Hopefully they can nail it. And then if they don't, you go find your own 200.
Yeah, so two reasons why I went to Deloitte, and this is Deloitte Singapore, not even Malaysia. Number one reason, the guys who work around the consulting team, they're very familiar with agriculture and also protein space and also biotech. Them initially it's supposed to be 3 months to write the IM, but when we meet up and then I exchange all my innovation, they say, man, this is so much and this is a very great thing. We need to really spend time. So at least they really appreciated the tech. So that's number one. So they had really good experience. Number two, they know the deal flow very well in terms of the appetite for investors, right? You don't knock on the wrong doors. You don't go to someone who don't even invest in Asia Pacific. That's already wasting your time, right? Number three, I tried to do some fundraise during my early days. It's completely take a lot of time. So I rather keep Deloitte as my gatekeeper. If you fill out A, B, C, then you get to D, right? So that saves time as well. And of course, they'll be also doing their due diligence, right? Somebody told me some time ago, engaging Deloitte is like yellow flag. I say, man, first time I'm hearing yellow flag. Why? They say, no, I mean, you engage the professional, of course, your investment going to look sexy, the numbers are going to look pretty handsome. I say, maybe yes, but Deloitte not going to simply take any Tom and Dick business story and write and put their rubber stamp on it and send to others. It's repetition for them as well. So this is where I think it's my perspective. And of course, again, as I said, there's no right or wrong answer. I tried it myself before. I done my Excel numbers. Of course, that's translated to them, and they've put in all the financial properly.
Yeah, and the other entrepreneurs I've talked to, a lot of them will say during fundraising, they're spending 80% of their time just looking for the money and talking to investors. They're not even having their eye on the business itself. So, and that's why I kind of asked, like, the benefit is, one, they can help you, they can put you into a network, they can bring their credibility to it. They also take the time off your hands, but they don't do that for free. So I can imagine as an entrepreneur, the biggest kind of, I don't know, consideration is like, wow, that's expensive. Whatever the bid was, or whatever they want to take their pound of flesh and equity or something, like, how did their fee come into that mindset? Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs would have like kind of choked at a lot of these fees, even though they would see the upside. So how did you balance that? And did you have like a set amount, like, look, I'm going to go this far. If it's more than this, I'll have to do it myself?
No, I think essentially it's really investment, I would say, right? So when I work with a financial team, the guy had programming in Excel, which I never seen. I only know we look up this and that. But he had just one whole damn programming. He just changed one X parameter strip. Everything changes, right? So at least that, of course, that gives me a lot of enhanced learning curve on really how you can work around your financial models. And then, of course, the perspective and the competition around you, you cannot be drawn to yourself that you are the best, but there is also people, how much they have raised, what's the valuation. So that I also told them I don't want to shoot myself to the moon with valuation, because then I don't want to face a down round. At the same time, I don't want to shoot myself to the ground, because I don't want to be selling something for very cheap. We want to come to with something palatable for investors in that space, the kind of revenue, the kind of PE. So of course, the PE was not really a challenge or question mark for me, because I thought if we spend on this, I get benefits, especially time. As you just rightly put, 80% of the time, there's almost 10 months in a year. I just gone for that. Then if I fail to raise the money, then what I'm going to do in the next year, right? I can't let, until now, I'm proud to say that we keep hiring, never let go people. So that's biggest achievement for me, to keep people.
All right, man, you got these big goals, requires a lot of confidence and persistence. How do you maintain that as the challenges of entrepreneurship comes forward towards you? I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here. Like you said, you have 101 problems. How do you maintain confidence? How do you maintain persistence? How do you keep moving forward when the world's kind of constantly pressing against you?
So I would say that it really goes back to me. So I really take care of myself. My choice of words with people is often has to put the moral up, no moral down. They can't gut the moral down, and really need to elevate that spirit. Once I get my team spirit up, I got 72 plus me, right? I'm not alone in this. I think then it's really exciting. You've been to my place, right? 8 o'clock in the evening. I still had my colleague around to really go with us. And these are sort of people are with me, who's not with me for the money, but with me for the passion, and they see their future with me. I think that's critically absolutely important. Yeah.
I've always loved that about this space. I mean, I will say it's a double-edged sword, because if you do something that hurts that promise to them, then it's like a complete shift the opposite way. But while you have that momentum, I mean, your team building it's critical, the core of your culture, it's everything. Yeah, and if it's going well, you can feed off of it, which I think really helps you, because it's not just you, it's everyone around you as a team.
So it's not about their cognitive, it's not about thinking skill, but it's really about their spirit. If you no need to be very smart, but if you really have the spirit to go get it, we'll get maybe count of 10 instead of 2 if you're smart. But if you're too smart, you're too lazy to give up, then it's no point as well, right? So this is where I try to balance this along. During my early days, I just want to work absolutely with smart people. Then I understood that working with smart people is something, as you say, is double-edged sword in a lot of ways, actually. But I'm not saying I'm working with stupid people, but I don't really pay emphasis on their qualification or their CGPAs or whatnot. It's about personality. And this is where my HR has a very rigorous process to filter people who suits for the organization rather than we hire and fire. We rather hire and train and grow.
Oh man, I mean, that's a whole other podcast in itself. It's like, how do you build a team that can come to scale? And every organization, as they go through these, I don't know, it's like the startup, the pure startup, you're 5 to 10 people. That's a vastly different team than when you're 25 to 50 to 100 versus when you are 100 to 1,000. Like every organizational culture shift requires different people. And sometimes you need the 3 smart people, which is to say they're from the industry, to just get started. And then you need the next group that's like super passionate, may not know so much, but is capable of learning really quickly. And then you kind of need like the specialist, they're the CFO or the chief technical officer. And they come in, they're a mix of both. They have industry experience, they're passionate about it, but then they're also really smart. And it's fun to kind of see how organizations ebb and flow with that. And I've seen that in my own organizations, and sometimes you get it right and sometimes you get it horribly wrong, but that's kind of part of the process of the whole life cycle of a business.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right, man. So last question. You're talking to right now an aspiring entrepreneur of any age. They're kind of looking out, they see a problem, they want to solve it. What are 3 pieces of advice you give them as they get on in their journey? Get them a little bit further, a little bit faster with fewer mistakes.
So if you are young, you're just coming out, you have a great idea. I think you need sort of test your idea in a company very related to you. You get onto a job at least for some time to really understand the organizational skill, right? Because when you work in an organization, you know what is the do and what is the don't, right? Then you get your culture right when you start your own startup. And second, of course, that will build experience, networks outside in the similar industry. That helps you to grow, right? Then number 3 also brings a little bit of maturity and understanding, because when you're too young, you have too much of adrenaline rush. At the same time, I'm not saying that you cannot come up from a college dormitory and start your startup, but I don't think many will get lucky with that.